I never imagined that the man I'd shared a bed with for 5 years, the one who whispered promises in the dead of night, was nothing but a shadow. A mafia boss cloaked in the skin of a devoted husband. But when the truth unraveled, I didn't run. I proved my loyalty in ways that shattered us both, and the shock in his eyes, that was my victory. It started innocently enough, or so I thought, in the rain-slicked streets of a city that chewed up dreams and spat out bones. My name is Mara, and this is how I became entangled in a web I helped weave. 5 years ago, I was scraping by in a forgotten corner of Chicago, working double shifts at a diner that smelled of grease and regret. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 18, leaving me with a mountain of debt and a younger brother, Luca, who was spiraling into the kind of trouble that ends with a bullet. He owed money to the wrong people, small-time thugs who worked for bigger shadows. I remember the night they came for him, kicking in our apartment door like it was paper. I fought back, grabbed a kitchen knife, and slashed one across the arm. Blood sprayed, hot and sticky, and for a moment I thought I'd killed us both. That's when he appeared. Alessandro. Tall, with eyes like polished obsidian, and a jaw that could cut glass. He wasn't one of them, but he commanded the room without a word. The thugs froze, then backed off like whipped dogs. He looked at me, not with pity, but with calculation, as if I were a puzzle he intended to solve. "You're brave," he said, his voice low and accented, Italian roots threading through it. "But bravery won't pay your brother's debts." He offered a deal. Marry him, play the part of his wife, and he'd erase Luca's slate. It sounded insane, but desperation has a way of making madness feel like salvation. I said yes, not knowing I was stepping into a cage disguised as a life. Our wedding was a quiet affair in a courthouse. No flowers, no vows that meant anything. He kissed me afterward, cold and perfunctory, like sealing a contract. We moved into a penthouse overlooking the lake, all glass and steel, a fortress in the sky. Alessandro told me he was in imports, fine wines, rare artifacts. I believed him because I wanted to. The first year was a careful dance. He was gone most nights, returning with the scent of smoke and something metallic on his clothes. I didn't ask questions. Instead, I built a routine. Mornings in the kitchen, evenings reading books I'd never had time for before. But there were cracks. Whispers on phone calls he took in his study, doors locked behind him. Once I found a gun in his drawer, sleek and loaded. He caught me holding it, his hand closing over mine like a vice. "Curiosity kills, Mara," he murmured, his breath against my ear. I put it down, but the weight lingered in my palm. As months blurred into years, the facade deepened. Alessandro wasn't affectionate, but he was possessive. He'd touch my shoulder in public, acclaim rather than comfort. At galas, events for his business associates, I'd stand by his side, smiling through gritted teeth as men with scarred knuckles eyed me like merchandise. One night, a rival importer leered too long, his hand brushing my waist. Alessandro's response was swift. A glass shattered against the wall, and the man was dragged out by security. Later, in the car, he gripped the wheel until his knuckles whitened. "No one touches what's mine," he said, his voice a blade. I nodded, but inside a seed of doubt sprouted. Was I his wife, or his property? Luca thrived under Alessandro's protection. He got clean, started a job in construction. But I saw the fear in his eyes when Alessandro visited. Respect laced with terror. "He's not what he seems, Mara," Luca whispered once, over coffee. I shushed him, afraid the walls had ears. But the warnings piled up. Strange cars idling outside our building. News reports of bodies found in the river, linked to organized crime. I pushed it down, buried it under the illusion of stability. After all, Alessandro provided. He never raised a hand to me, never demanded more than the occasional performance in bed, mechanical, devoid of passion. It was enough, or so I told myself, but trauma doesn't stay buried. Mine came from before him, a childhood marked by my father's gambling, my mother's quiet endurance until the crash that took them both. I carried that silence, that endurance, like a scar. And Alessandro? He had his own ghosts. I'd catch him staring at old photos in his study, a woman with dark hair, smiling. His sister, he said once, killed in a rival dispute. I didn't press. We were both broken, fitting together in jagged ways. 2 years in, the first real crack appeared. I was alone in the scent house when a package arrived, unmarked. Inside, photos, Alessandro shaking hands with known mobsters, blood on his shirt in one. A note. Your husband is Don Alessandro Rossi. Leave before he kills you too. My heart hammered. I burned them in the sink, the smoke setting off alarms. When he came home, I said it was a cooking mishap. He watched me, unblinking, then nodded. But that night, he didn't sleep. I felt his eyes on me in the dark, weighing my loyalty. I started paying attention after that, eavesdropping on calls, noting the men who visited, tattooed enforcers with names like Vito and Marco. Alessandro ran the Rossi family, one of Chicago's most ruthless syndicates. Drugs, extortion, hits. The imports were a front. And our marriage? A cover. Why me? I wondered. Why fake a life with a nobody like me? The answer came in fragments. I was clean, no record, the perfect alibi wife. But there was more. Something personal, twisted. One evening, 3 years into this charade, he came home wounded. A bullet grazed on his arm, blood soaking his shirt. I patched him up in silence, my hands steady from years of diner scrapes. As I tied the bandage, his fingers caught my chin, forcing my gaze up. You don't flinch, he observed, his voice rough. Most women would. I met his stare. I'm not most women. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Interest, perhaps. But he released me, retreating to his study. That night, I dreamed of running, but my feet were rooted in blood. The hooks kept coming. A rival family targeted us, a car bomb that missed by minutes. Alessandro pulled me from the wreckage, his body shielding mine. Stay close, he growled, gun in hand. We fled to a safe house, a dingy warehouse on the outskirts. There, in the dim light, he confessed fragments. This life chooses you, Mara. It doesn't let go. I wanted to scream that he'd chosen me as bait, but I held my tongue. Instead, I cooked meals from scraps, bandaged more wounds. In those weeks, the distance narrowed. Touches lingered. Conversations turned personal. He spoke of his father's betrayal, how he'd risen through rivers of blood. I shared my parents' end, the debt that chained me. For the first time, it felt real. But was it? Or another layer of his deception? Returning home, the tension coiled tighter. I found a file in his safe, my photo, background check, notes. Ideal for cover, no ties, loyal by necessity. Rage simmered, but I played along, proved my worth in small ways, intercepting a suspicious call, warning him of a tale. He noticed, his gaze sharpening. You're more than I expected, he said once over dinner. I smiled, but inside plans formed. I wasn't escaping. I was burrowing deeper. 4 years marked a turning point. Luca vanished. Panic clawed at me. Alessandro mobilized his men, but I knew better. I tracked Luca myself, using scraps of info from overheard talks. Found him in a rival's den, beaten but alive. I went in alone, armed with Alessandro's gun I'd stolen. Shot the guard, dragged Luca out. When Alessandro's crew arrived, it was done. He stared at me in the aftermath, blood on my hands. "You risked everything," he said, voice laced with something new. "Respect? Fear?" "For family," I replied, but it was more. It was proof. The 5th year unraveled everything. Whispers of betrayal within his ranks. A mole. Suspicion fell on me. The outsider wife. He confronted me in our bedroom, gun on the table. "Tell me the truth, Mara. Are you with them?" His eyes were voids, promising death. I didn't beg. Instead, I laid out the file I'd found years ago. "I knew," I said, "from the beginning, and I stayed." Shock flickered, but he masked it. "Why?" I stepped closer, my voice steady. "Because this life chose me too. And I'll prove it." That night, the real test came. His second-in-command, Vito, was the mole. I uncovered evidence, tapes, ledgers, hidden in our home. Presented it to Alessandro. He executed Vito himself, a single shot in his basement. As the echo faded, he turned to me, blood spattered. "You could have run." I met his gaze. I didn't. For the first time, his mask cracked. Vulnerability in a monster's eyes, but secrets breed more. Mine surfaced next. The accident that killed my parents? Not an accident. My father had crossed the Rossis years ago. Alessandro knew. He'd chosen me not just for cover, but for revenge, keeping the daughter close, watching her suffer unknowingly. The revelation hit like a gut punch. I confronted him in his study, knife in hand, the same one from that first night. "You used me," I hissed. He didn't deny it. "And you stayed," he countered, stepping into the blade's path. "What does that make you?" We stood there inches apart, the air thick with unspoken truths. His hand closed over the knife, drawing blood from his palm. "Prove your loyalty one last time, Mara." The challenge hung. Electric. I could end it, plunge the blade, but I dropped it, the clang echoing. Instead, I kissed him. Fierce, claiming. Not love, not yet. Power. Twisted allegiance. Before we continue the story, please drop a comment telling me where you're watching this from. And don't forget to subscribe to Mara's Betrayal. The days blurred after that. Alessandro's world swallowed me whole. I attended meetings, learned the codes, the drops. He taught me to shoot, to negotiate with killers. "You're a natural," he said, watching me hit targets, but praise came with barbs. "Don't get cocky. This life eats the weak." I wasn't weak. Trauma had forged me, losing parents, saving Luca, surviving him. Yet doubts gnawed. Was this loyalty or Stockholm? I pushed it down, focused on the power surging through me. A new threat emerged. The Fedorov family, Russian rivals pushing into our territory. Alessandro planned a strike, but I sensed a trap. Overheard a call, encrypted, but I cracked it using skills I'd honed in secret. Warned him. The ambush failed. We hit them first. In the warehouse carnage, I took my first life. A Fedorov enforcer lunging at Alessandro. The recoil jarred my bones, but I felt nothing. He pulled me close amid the smoke. "You saved me." His voice cracked, rare emotion, but his eyes held questions. How deep did my loyalty run? Weeks later, the shock came. I discovered I was pregnant. Not planned, a slip in our twisted intimacy. I hid it, unsure. Told no one. But Alessandro noticed changes. My fatigue, aversion to smells. Confronted me in the kitchen. "What's wrong?" I lied. but he pressed, hand on my stomach. Realization dawned. Mine? I nodded, his face twisted. Joy? Terror? This changes everything. He pulled away, pacing. In this life, children are targets. Fear iced my veins. Was he regretting? Planning to end it? That night, betrayal struck from within. Marco, another lieutenant, sold us out. Fedorov stormed the penthouse. Gunfire shattered glass. Alessandro fought like a demon, but they outnumbered. I grabbed the hidden gun, shot two, dragged him to the safe room. As doors sealed, he collapsed, wounded. Go, he gasped. Save yourself. I shook my head. Not without you. Patching him, I whispered the truth. It's our child. Shock widened his eyes. You knew? Sirens wailed outside. Reinforcements? Or police? Trapped, bleeding, he confessed. I faked the husband role to break you, Mara, for your father's sins, but you broke me instead. Tears burned my eyes. Then we're even. The door buckled under assault. I raised my gun, ready. The door to the safe room shuddered again, metal groaning under the impact of a battering ram. Alessandro's blood soaked through the makeshift bandage I'd pressed against his side, warm and slick against my fingers. His face was pale, but those obsidian eyes stayed locked on mine, searching for something I wasn't sure I still possessed. Mercy, maybe, or the last shred of the girl he'd married 5 years ago. You should have run when you had the chance, he rasped, voice barely above the chaos outside. Before the child, before all of this. I laughed, a low, bitter sound that surprised even me. Run where, Alessandro? You made sure I had nowhere left to go the day you paid off Luca's debt. You built the cage, remember? Another crash. The hinges screamed. I tightened my grip on the pistol, checked the magazine. 6 rounds left. Enough to make them regret coming here, not enough to get us out alive. He reached up, fingers brushing my cheek, leaving a smear of his own blood. I built it to punish you. For your father. For what he cost me. His thumb traced my lower lip, almost tender. But you turned it into something else. You turned me into something else. I wanted to spit venom at him. I wanted to tell him he was still the monster who'd lied to me for half a decade, who'd used my body and my fear as weapons. Instead, I leaned into his touch for one selfish second, because in that moment I needed to feel something other than terror. The door buckled inward with a final, deafening crack. 3 Fedorov soldiers burst in, rifles raised. I didn't think. I fired. The first dropped with a hole in his throat. The second lunged. I sidestepped, felt the heat of his muzzle flash, scorch my hair as I put 2 rounds in his chest. The third hesitated just long enough for Alessandro to drag himself up, snatch the fallen rifle, and empty half a magazine into him. Silence fell, thick and choking, broken only by our ragged breathing and the distant wail of sirens. He slumped back against the wall, laughing softly, wet, broken, disbelieving. You're magnificent when you kill, Mara. Don't romanticize it, I snapped, hauling him to his feet. We're not out yet. We stumbled through the wreckage of the penthouse. Bodies littered the marble floor. His men, their men, impossible to tell anymore. The air stank of cordite and copper. I found Luca in the hallway, slumped against a shattered mirror, a knife buried in his gut. My knees buckled. No, no, no. I dropped beside him, pressing my hands to the wound as if I could hold his life in. His eyes fluttered open, glassy with pain. Mara, got away. Told you he wasn't. His voice faded. Blood bubbled at his lips. Shh, don't talk. We're getting you out. Lies. I could feel the truth soaking through my fingers. Luca's hand found mine, weak. Proud of you, for surviving him. Then his grip went slack. I don't remember screaming. I only remember Alessandro dragging me away as more footsteps thundered up the emergency stairs. We escaped through the service elevator, down to the garage where a black SUV waited, keys still in the ignition, one of his men's final acts of loyalty. He drove. I sat in the passenger seat cradling the ghost of my brother, staring at blood that wasn't all Alessandro's now. The city blurred past, neon bleeding into rain. If you're still watching the story till now, drop a comment so I know you're with me. We ended up in an old Rossi safe house on the edge of the industrial district, an abandoned meatpacking plant that still smelled faintly of bleach and death. Alessandro's personal doctor arrived an hour later, a gray-haired man who didn't ask questions. He dug the bullet out of Alessandro's side, stitched him up, gave me something to clean the miscarriage of grief threatening to swallow me whole. I didn't cry until the doctor left. Then I shattered, quietly, violently, curled on a cot in the corner while Alessandro watched from the shadows, unable to approach. When the storm passed, I wiped my face and stood. We end this, I said. My voice didn't shake anymore. The Fedorovs, Marco's betrayal, all of it. Tonight. He studied me for a long moment, something unreadable shifting behind his eyes. You're not asking permission. No, I'm telling you the plan. I laid it out like I'd been born to this life instead of dragged into it. Marco had survived the raid. He was the one who'd opened the door for the Russians. He thought Alessandro was dead or dying, thought he could inherit the empire by selling what was left to the highest bidder. But Marco had one weakness: vanity. He'd want to celebrate his coup personally. There was a club downtown, Obsidian, neutral ground where bosses sometimes met to carve up territory without immediate bloodshed. Marco would be there tonight, toasting his new reign with the Fedorov underboss. We hit the club at 2 a.m. I walked in first, alone, dressed in black silk that clung like a second skin, hair loose, lips blood red. Every eye turned, some recognizing the Rossi widow, others just appreciating the view. I felt Alessandro's gaze on me from the shadows upstairs, where he waited with 3 of our most loyal remaining soldiers. Marco sat in the VIP booth, laughing too loud, a Fedorov lieutenant at his side. When he saw me, his smile faltered, then widened into something predatory. Mara, he called, patting the seat beside him. Come to beg for mercy, or to switch sides while there's still something left. I slid into the booth, close enough to smell the vodka on his breath. I came to deliver a message. His hand landed on my thigh, possessive. And what message is that, Bella? That my husband sends his regards. The lights cut out, chaos erupted, screams, shattering glass, the staccato of suppressed gunfire. I drove the stiletto blade I'd hidden in my garter into Marco's throat before he could even reach for his gun. Hot blood sprayed across my face as he gurgled, clawing at the wound. The Fedorov beside him went down next, Alessandro's bullet taking the top of his skull off. When the emergency lights flickered on, the booth was a slaughterhouse. Alessandro stood over me, chest heaving, gun still smoking. He looked at Marco's body, then at me, covered in his traitor's blood, and something ancient and terrible passed between us. We left the club without resistance. Word travels fast when a ghost returns from the grave. Back at the meat-packing plant, dawn bled gray through cracked windows. Alessandro poured 2 glasses of whiskey with shaking hands. Pain, adrenaline, something deeper. He handed me one. "To Luca," he said quietly. I didn't drink. "He died because of your war. He died because I was weak enough to trust the wrong people." His voice cracked on the last word. "And because I dragged you into it." I set the glass down untouched. "You didn't drag me. You offered a rope when I was drowning. I climbed it. Everything after was my choice." He stepped closer, crowding me against the cold concrete wall. "Was it? Or did I twist you into something you were never meant to be?" I met his stare without flinching. "Look at me, Alessandro. Really look. The girl you married died the night those thugs kicked in my door. You just gave the woman who crawled out of her grave a purpose." His forehead dropped to mine. For the first time in 5 years, his hands trembled when they cupped my face. "I don't deserve your loyalty." "No," I whispered. "You don't. But you have it anyway." We didn't kiss. Not yet. The air between us crackled with too much blood, too many ghosts. Instead, he rested his hand over my stomach, flat again, empty, and grief passed through us both like a shared wound. The next weeks were war. I learned the business faster than anyone expected. Shipments, protection rackets, money laundering through legitimate fronts. I sat in on meetings, voice steady as I suggested routes, identified weak points in rival operations. Men who'd once dismissed me as the boss's pretty accessory now waited for my opinion before speaking. Alessandro watched it all with a mixture of pride and dread. Every time I pulled the trigger, every time I negotiated a deal with ice in my veins, he looked at me like he was seeing his own darkness reflected back and realizing he'd created it. One night, after we'd eliminated the last Fedorov stronghold in the city, he found me on the roof of the safe house, staring at the skyline. The war was over. We'd won. Chicago was ours again. He didn't speak at first, just stood behind me, close enough that I felt his heat. "I used to think revenge would feel cleaner," he said finally. "That keeping you close would balance the scale for my sister, for everything your father took." I turned to face him. And now? Now I know scales don't balance. They just tip further into hell. He brushed a strand of hair from my face. "I became the thing I hated most, a man who destroys what he loves." My heart stuttered. "You don't love me, Alessandro. You own me." His eyes darkened. "I stopped owning you the night you saved my life in that safe room. I've been trying to earn you ever since. And failing." The confession hung between us, raw and terrifying. I stepped into him, fingers curling into his shirt. "Then stop trying to earn me. Start deserving me." He kissed me then, slow, deliberate, like a man asking forgiveness with his mouth instead of words. I kissed him back just as hard, tasting blood and whiskey and 5 years of lies finally burning away. But peace is a lie in our world. 3 months later, I sat across from him in his study, the same room where he'd once hidden guns and ghosts. On the desk between us lay a single photograph, taken from a distance. Me walking into an obstetrician's office downtown. I was pregnant again. His gaze lifted to mine, unreadable. "How long?" 10 weeks. He stood slowly, came around the desk, knelt in front of me, Don Alessandro Rossi, on his knees for the first time in his life. "This child will not grow up in war," he said, voice fierce. I swear it. I threaded my fingers through his hair. Then you'll have to change the world we live in, because I won't raise my baby in a cage. Something shifted in his expression. Resolve, terror, determination. Our baby, he corrected softly. I didn't argue. That night he made plans, not for expansion, but for extraction. Legitimate investments, distance from the old guard, a future where our child might never have to hold a gun. I watched him work and realized the greatest shock wasn't that he'd faked being my husband for 5 years. It was that somehow he'd become one for real, and I'd become something far more dangerous than his wife. I'd become his equal. The first real crack in our new life appeared on a morning that should have been ordinary. I was 6 months pregnant, the swell of my stomach no longer hideable under loose shirts. Alessandro had kept his word so far. Meetings were shorter, bloodier work delegated to others. We'd moved out of the penthouse into a fortified estate north of the city, surrounded by acres of woods and guards who answered to both of us now. He'd even started talking about Italy, a vineyard his family still owned in Tuscany. A clean break. I should have known clean breaks don't exist for people like us. I woke to an empty bed and the sound of raised voices downstairs. Alessandro's study. I pulled on a robe and descended the marble stairs barefoot, one hand cradling the weight of our child. The door was ajar. I paused in the hallway, listening. The old guard won't accept it, Don Rossi. You go legitimate, they'll see weakness. Someone will challenge. The voice belonged to Enzo, one of the few capos who'd survived the Fedorov War. Loyal, but old school. Blood in, blood out. Alessandro's reply was ice. Then they'll learn what weakness truly looks like when I bury them next to Marco. Silence. Then Enzo again, quieter. It's not just the men. Word is the commission in New York is watching. They don't like unknowns in the wife's seat, especially one who pulled triggers beside you. My blood chilled. The commission, the governing body no one spoke about openly, 5 families in New York, plus representatives from Chicago, Detroit, Philly. They set rules. They sanctioned hits on bosses. If they were discussing me, I pushed the door open. Both men turned. Enzo's face tightened with discomfort. Alessandro's went carefully blank. How long have they been talking about me? I asked, voice calm. Enzo glanced at Alessandro for permission. Alessandro nodded once. 3 months, Enzo admitted. Ever since you sat in on the sit-down with the Milwaukee outfit. Word spread fast. The Rossi widow who became consigliere. They don't like women with that kind of power. Say it upsets tradition. I laughed, sharp and humorless. Tradition didn't keep Marco from selling us to the Russians. Tradition didn't save Luca. I did. Enzo shifted. With respect, Signora, tradition keeps the peace. If the commission calls a meeting, they'll call it over my dead body. Alessandro cut in, lethal quiet. Or theirs. Enzo left, soon after. The door closed with a soft click that felt like a gunshot. Alessandro crossed to me, hands gentle on my shoulders. You weren't supposed to hear that. But I did. I searched his face. You knew. I knew they were grumbling. I didn't know it had reached the commission. His thumb traced my collarbone, a habit he'd developed when trying to soothe me. I'll handle it. No, I stepped back. We handle it, together, or we don't handle it at all. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Together. We spent the next weeks preparing. Intelligence came in fragments, tapped phones, bought loyalties, old favors called in. The commission wanted a meeting. neutral ground, a private estate in upstate New York just before Christmas. All 5 New York bosses would be there, plus the Chicago representative. They'd summoned Alessandro to discuss succession and structure. Translation: they wanted him to step down, or divorce me, or put me back in a gilded cage where wives belonged. Any refusal would be seen as defiance. Defiance meant war on multiple fronts. I refused to be the reason he lost everything he'd bled for, so I made my own plan. 3 nights before we were due to fly out, I slipped into his study after he'd fallen asleep. The safe combination I'd known for years. Inside, ledgers, cash, a burner phone he thought I didn't know about, and a file. Thick, labeled simply M. Rossi. My heart stuttered. Mara Rossi. I opened it with fingers that didn't tremble. Inside were documents I'd never seen. My father's original debt to the Rossi family. Not gambling, as I'd always believed, but something worse. He'd been an informant. Low level, feeding information to the feds about shipments in the early 2000s. Alessandro's sister hadn't died in a rival hit. She'd been killed on federal orders after my father's testimony put a spotlight on the family. The accident that killed my parents? Rossi retaliation. Subtle, clean, untraceable. But Alessandro hadn't known it was my father at first. Not until years later, when he'd already married me for the perfect cover. By then, there was a letter, handwritten, dated 2 years into our marriage. Mara, if you're reading this, I'm dead, or you finally found the safe. Either way, you deserve the truth. I chose you because you were clean. Because your brother's debt gave me leverage. Because keeping you close felt like justice. But somewhere between the first time you bandaged my wounds and the night you killed for me, justice stopped mattering. You became the only thing that did. I can't undo what my family did to yours. I can't undo what I've done to you. All I can do is burn this life down and build something new, if you'll let me. Forgive me, or don't. But know this. Every day since you said I do in that courthouse, I've been trying to become a man worthy of the vows I never meant. I sat there until dawn, letter clenched in my fist, tears falling silently onto the paper. When Alessandro found me, he took one look at my face and went to his knees. You read it. All of it. He waited for the blade, verbal or literal. I'd earned both. Instead, I pulled him up and kissed him until we were both shaking. We're not going to New York as supplicants, I said against his mouth. We're going as equals. And if they can't accept that, we'll remind them why the Rossi name still makes men flinch. The meeting was set for December 21st. We flew private, landed in a blizzard. The estate was a fortress of stone and old money, Christmas lights twinkling like mockery against armed guards in the snow. They made me wait in an antechamber while Alessandro went in first. Tradition, they said. Wives didn't sit at the table. I waited exactly 7 minutes. Then I walked in unannounced. 13 men around a long mahogany table. Cigars, crystal decanters. Faces that had ordered more deaths than I could count. Conversation stopped. Eyes turned to me, some curious, some hostile, 1 or 2 amused. The head of the Gambino family, old Salvatore, leaned back. Signora Rossi, this is a private meeting. I didn't sit. I stood at Alessandro's side, hand resting lightly on his shoulder. A claim. I'm aware, I said, but since the agenda concerns me, I thought I'd save everyone time. Murmurs. Alessandro's hand covered mine, steady. Salvatore's eyes narrowed. You have balls, Signora. I'll give you that. But this life has rules. Rules that failed when my husband's second sold him to the Russians, I replied coolly. Rules that let a rat like Marco rise because no one watched closely enough. Rules that would have left Chicago in ashes if I'd stayed in the kitchen baking cookies. A few chuckles, quickly stifled. I continued. You're afraid of what I represent. Not a woman with power. Change. Because if one wife can sit at the table and keep her family alive, others might demand the same. And then your little empire of secrets starts crumbling. Salvatore's face reddened. You think you can come in here? I'm not asking permission, I cut in. I'm stating facts. Alessandro steps down. You get war. You try to remove me. You get war. You accept the new structure. My husband as Don, me as his consigliere. You get peace. And a partnership Chicago hasn't offered in decades. Silence stretched. Then the Bonanno boss, younger than the rest, leaned forward. And what exactly do you bring to this partnership, Signora? I smiled. Information. The kind that's been slipping through your fingers. I slid a folder across the table. Inside, proof that one of their own, Salvatore's underboss, had been skimming from the commission's shared funds, routing money to an offshore account, planning his own rise. Salvatore went white. I could have sent this to the feds, I said softly. Instead, I brought it here, as a gesture. The room erupted. Accusations, denials, guns drawn. Alessandro stood, voice cutting through the chaos like a whip. Enough. Everyone froze. He looked at each man in turn. My wife just saved this commission from rotting from the inside. You want to punish her for that? Fine, but you'll do it over my corpse, and then you'll deal with hers. No one moved. Finally, the youngest boss nodded. Motion to table this discussion. Chicago keeps its structure. Rossi remains Don. One by one, hands raised. Even Salvatore, face twisted with rage. We left the estate that night with the commission's reluctant blessing. In the car, snow whipping against the windows, Alessandro pulled me close. You played them perfectly. We played them, I corrected. He kissed my temple. How did you get the evidence on Salvatore's underboss? I hesitated. This was the last secret. The one I'd carried since the night Luca died. I've been building my own network for 2 years, I admitted. Informants, favors, things even you didn't know about. He pulled back, searching my face in the passing headlights. Why? Because I needed to know I could survive without you. If you ever decided I was more liability than asset. Pain flashed across his features. And now? Now I know I can survive anything, but I don't want to. Not without you. He rested his forehead against mine. Never again, Mara. No more secrets. I almost believed him. We flew home on December 22nd, Christmas Eve in 2 days. The estate decorated for a holiday we'd never truly celebrated. A tree in the foyer, lights twinkling. For the baby, Alessandro had said. That night I couldn't sleep. The child kicked hard, as if sensing my unrest. I slipped downstairs for water, paused outside Alessandro's study. The door was closed, but light seeped underneath. Voices. Low, urgent. I pressed my ear to the wood. She's too dangerous now, Don Rossi. The commission only backed down because they were caught off guard. Give it time. They'll want her gone. Permanently. Enzo again. Alessandro's reply was too quiet to catch. Then Enzo. You know the only way to secure peace is to give them something. A sacrifice. My blood froze. Alessandro's voice finally cold as winter. You're suggesting I offer my wife, my child. I'm suggesting you choose between her and the empire you built. Silence. Then, get out. But I said get out. And Enzo? If I hear this conversation repeated, I'll carve the tongue from your head myself. Footsteps. The door flew open. Enzo stormed past me in the shadows, didn't see me. The study door slammed. I stood there, heart pounding, hand on my belly. Alessandro hadn't agreed, but he hadn't refused outright either. The last shard of trust cracked. I went back upstairs, packed a single bag in the dark. Gun, cash, new IDs I'd prepared months ago, just in case. I was at the bedroom door when his voice stopped me. Going somewhere? He stood in the doorway, silhouette against the hall light, eyes knowing. I didn't lie. I heard. He stepped inside, closed the door softly. And you think I'd let you go? You might not have a choice. He crossed the room slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. There's always a choice, Mara. I made mine the day you walked into that meeting and turned their world upside down. He knelt again. God, he kept doing that, and pressed his lips to my stomach. The baby kicked against his mouth. I will burn every bridge, every alliance, every piece of this empire to ash before I let anyone touch you. Or our child. Tears blurred my vision. Even if it costs you everything? He looked up, eyes fierce. You are my everything. I dropped the bag. We sank to the floor together, clinging like survivors of a shipwreck. Later, tangled in sheets, he whispered against my skin. There's one last thing. I tensed. The commission didn't just back down because of the evidence. They backed down because I told them the truth. What truth? That if they came for you, I'd go to the feds myself. Every ledger, every body, every secret this life is built on. I'd take it all down with me. I pulled back, stunned. You'd destroy yourself, for me. I'd destroy the world for you, Mara. I thought you knew that by now. I did. Finally. The next morning, Enzo was gone, found in the river, single gunshot. Official story, suicide. Unofficial, Alessandro's warning to anyone else who thought sacrifice was an option. Christmas Eve, snow blanketing the estate, we stood in front of the tree. No gifts, just us. He slipped a ring onto my finger, not the plain band from the courthouse, but something new. Black diamonds, our color. Marry me again, he said. For real this time. I looked at the man who'd faked a marriage to break me, who'd lied for 5 years, who'd killed and bled and changed because I demanded it. Yes, I said, but this time, I'm keeping my gun on the garter. He laughed, the rare, full sound I'd only heard a handful of times, and kissed me until we forgot the world outside existed. Our daughter was born in April, screaming loud enough to wake the dead. We named her Lucia, light, and for the first time in either of our lives, the darkness didn't win. Chunk 4. 2,000 words. Final. Lucia came into the world on a rainy April morning, her cry sharp and demanding, as if she already knew the cost of silence in our family. I held her first, slick and furious, and felt something shift inside me. Irreversible. Terrifying. Alessandro stood beside the bed, face stripped of every mask he'd ever worn. When the nurse placed her in his arms, he didn't move for a long time. Just stared at this tiny creature, as though she were the only clean thing he'd ever touched. She has your eyes, he whispered. And your stubborn chin, I replied, voice raw from hours of labor. He laughed once, broken and awed, then bent to kiss my forehead. Thank you, Mara. For her. For everything. We took her home to the estate 2 days later. The guards had been doubled, the perimeter reinforced. Alessandro had spent the months of my pregnancy quietly dismantling the most dangerous parts of the empire, dissolving crews that dealt in heroin, selling off shipping routes that carried more than wine. He kept the legitimate businesses, construction, restaurants, the vineyard in Tuscany we'd visited once when I was 7 months along and waddling through rows of grapes under a sun that felt like forgiveness. But empires don't dissolve cleanly. There are always loose threads. The first thread tugged 3 months after Lucia's birth. I was in the nursery, rocking her to sleep after a midnight feeding, when Alessandro appeared in the doorway. He'd been in the city for a meeting, one of the last, he'd promised. But the look on his face told me promises were fracturing again. Salvatore Gambino is dead, he said quietly. Heart attack. Official story. I shifted Lucia to my shoulder, patting her back. Unofficial? Poison. Slow. Undetectable. His underboss, the one you exposed, took the throne. And the first thing he did was send a message. He handed me a photograph, delivered to one of our restaurants downtown, tucked inside a child's toy box. It was Lucia, taken from a distance through the nursery window. She was in her crib, mobile spinning above her, a red circle drawn around her head in marker. My arms tightened around her instinctively. She stirred, whimpered. They're testing us, I said. My voice didn't shake. It couldn't. Seeing if we'll fold now that there's something fragile to protect. Alessandro's jaw clenched. They'll learn the same lesson Marco did. You don't touch what's mine. But his eyes, God, his eyes were exhausted. I saw it then. The weight of every choice that had led us here. The bodies, the lies, the blood on both our hands. I laid Lucia back in her crib, tucked the blanket around her. Then I turned to him. We end this, I said. Not with war, with surgery. Cut out the cancer before it spreads. He searched my face. How? By giving them what they've always feared most. Proof that the old ways are dead. The plan formed over sleepless nights, whispered in the dark while Lucia slept between us. We would host a summit. Here, at the estate. Invite the new Gambino boss and the remaining commission members. Neutral ground on our terms. A celebration of Lucia's baptism. Innocent cover for a reckoning. They accepted. Of course they did. Curiosity is a powerful lure. The day arrived crisp and golden, early autumn leaves turning the driveway into fire. The estate swarmed with guests, old bosses in tailored suits, their wives in pearls, children running across the lawn under the watchful eyes of armed nannies. White tents, string quartet. A priest flown in from Rome for the ceremony. I wore white. Not for purity, never that, but for clarity. Alessandro in black, as always. Lucia in christening lace that had belonged to his mother. The baptism went flawlessly. Water on her forehead. Her indignant wail. Applause. Toasts. Then came dinner under the largest tent, long tables groaning with food. I sat at Alessandro's right, the Gambino boss, Vincent, young and hungry, across from us. Conversation flowed. Business, family, the weather. Surface calm. Mid-dessert, I stood. All eyes turned to me. I'd like to propose a toast, I said, raising my glass, to new beginnings, and to the end of old debts. Murmurs of agreement. Glasses lifted. I continued. 5 years ago, my husband married me under false pretenses. He needed a cover. I needed survival. We both got more than we bargained for. A ripple of surprise. Alessandro's hand found my thigh under the table, steady. Some of you know parts of our story. Few know all of it. Tonight you will. I nodded to the staff. Screens descended from the tent ceiling. A projector hummed to life. Images appeared. Ledgers, bank transfers, photographs of meetings, Salvatore's underboss with federal agents, recordings, Vincent's voice, clear as day, ordering the hit on Salvatore. Planning to destabilize Chicago, carve it up among the remaining families. Gasps, chairs scraping, hands reaching for weapons. Vincent surged to his feet. "This is bullshit! Fabricated!" Alessandro's voice cut through like a blade. "Sit down, Vincent." Guards materialized. Our guards, guns trained. The guests froze. Some reached for phones. Signal jammers had been active since arrival. I stepped forward. "Every piece of evidence you're seeing has already been sent to the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York. Sealed indictments, RICO charges, enough to dismantle 3 families before Christmas." Vincent's face drained of color. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I tilted my head. "Ask yourself why the priest who baptized my daughter today is wearing a wire." The old man in clerical robes near the exit lifted a hand in subtle confirmation. Chaos threatened, but Alessandro rose beside me. "Here's what happens next," he said, voice carrying effortlessly. "Vincent will be arrested tonight, quietly, by the agents waiting beyond the gates. The rest of you will go home. You will disband the commission as it stands. You will transition to legitimate enterprises over the next 5 years, or you will face the same evidence tailored to your own houses." A longtime boss from Philly laughed bitterly. "And if we refuse?" I smiled. "Then you'll discover what happens when a mother decides her child will never grow up looking over her shoulder." No one refused. Vincent was escorted out by federal agents in plain clothes. The remaining guests left in stunned silence, their drivers searched, phones confiscated until they cleared the property. When the last car disappeared down the driveway, Alessandro turned to me. "You planned this for months." "Since the photograph of Lucia arrived." I met his gaze. I wasn't going to wait for the next one. He pulled me close, careful of the baby monitor clipped to my dress. "You just ended an era." "We ended it," I corrected. "Together." That night, after Lucia was asleep and the estate finally quiet, we stood on the balcony overlooking the darkened woods. He spoke first. "The vineyard in Tuscany. It's ready. Staff hired. No extradition worries. Italy doesn't play nice with U.S. RICO cases for old crimes." I leaned against the railing. "You're saying we walk away?" "I'm saying we run towards something instead of away. A life where our daughter learns to walk on grass, not marble. Where guns stay locked in safes that rust." I turned to him. "And you? Can you leave this behind?" He took my hands. "I left it behind the moment she took her first breath. You were just waiting for me to catch up." We left Chicago 2 weeks later. The flight was private, direct to Florence. Lucia slept most of the way in a bassinet, tiny fist curled around Alessandro's finger. I watched them and felt the last knot in my chest loosen. The vineyard was everything the photographs had promised and more. Rolling hills, stone farmhouse, olive groves silver in the moonlight. No guards at the gates. Just an old caretaker and his wife who cooked meals that tasted like memory. We renamed the place Villa Lucia. Days blurred into routine, mornings in the garden, afternoons tasting new wines, evenings with Lucia splashing in a copper tub while Alessandro read her Italian children's books, in a voice softened beyond recognition. But some nights I still woke reaching for the gun that wasn't there. One such night, 6 months after we'd arrived, I found him on the terrace, staring at the stars. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, wrapping a blanket around us both. "Thinking," he said, "about how close we came to losing everything." I rested my head on his shoulder. "We didn't lose. We chose." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "There's something I never told you." My heart stuttered. After everything, the idea of another secret felt like betrayal. He continued, "The day Lucia was born, I made a call to an old contact in witness protection. I offered everything, testimony, evidence, the works, in exchange for new lives. They turned me down, said I knew too much, that letting me walk would destabilize what was left. I pulled back. And I realized I didn't need them. You'd already given us what they couldn't. A way out on our terms." I exhaled slowly. "No more secrets?" "None." He kissed my palm. "Only truths from now on. Starting with this. I love you, Mara Rossi. Not the version I married for convenience. Not the weapon I helped forge. You, the woman who broke me open and rebuilt me better." Tears came then, silent and cleansing. "I love you too. The man who lied to me for 5 years. The monster who knelt for me. The father who sings off-key lullabies. All of you." We made love on the terrace that night, slow and reverent, stars wheeling overhead like witnesses. Years passed. Lucia grew wild and fearless, chasing chickens through the vines, speaking Italian before English, calling the caretaker nonno. We had 2 more children, Matteo, dark-eyed and serious like his father, Sophia, fierce and laughing like me. Alessandro ran the vineyard with the same ruthlessness he'd once applied to empires, but now it was about soil pH and harvest yields. He aged into something beautiful, silver at his temples, laugh lines deepening, hands stained with earth instead of blood. I wrote a book, anonymous, published under a pen name, a novel, they called it, about a woman who married a liar and learned to speak his language better than he ever had. It became a bestseller. No one ever connected it to us. Sometimes, late at night, I'd find him reading it. He'd look up when I entered the room, eyes soft. "You made us immortal," he'd say. "No," I'd reply. "I made us human." On the 10th anniversary of our arrival in Tuscany, we renewed our vows in the small chapel on the property. Just family. Lucia, now 10, carried flowers. Matteo held the rings. Sophia scattered petals with enthusiastic abandon. The priest, an old friend who knew everything and judged nothing, asked if we took each other again. Alessandro spoke first. "I take you, Mara, with every scar I gave you and every one you healed, in this life and whatever comes after." I echoed him, voice steady. "I take you, Alessandro, with every lie you told and every truth you learned to speak. Forever." We kissed while our children groaned and cheered. Later, under the same stars that had watched us begin again, he held me close. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked quietly. I thought of Luca's grave in Chicago, of blood on marble floors, of the girl who'd once held a kitchen knife against impossible odds. "No," I said finally, "because every step led here, to this." He smiled against my hair. "Then we won." We had. The Mafia boss who faked being my husband for 5 years never expected me to become the architect of his redemption. And I never expected to find peace in the arms of the man who'd once been my cage. But life, like loyalty, has a way of twisting into something unbreakable when forged in fire. This is where our story ends. Not with shock or betrayal, but with the quiet certainty of sunrise over vines heavy with fruit. We proved ourselves to each other over and over until proof was no longer needed. Only love remained. If you liked the story, drop a comment for part 2, and don't forget to subscribe to Mara's Betrayal.